They walked into confinement, the three of them casting long shadows as they walked through the front door and into the confinement unit of Stragview. The on-duty sergeant looked up from what he was doing long enough to buzz them in, and then found something better to do, so he wouldn't have to answer any questions if called to do so. He knew what the paperwork said. It said that James Allen Butterfield was being sent to the death house for housing as of tonight. He also knew, like most of the staff, that the death house had been closed, and, like most of the staff, that Mr. Butterfield would never ride the lightning or take God's sleepy needle in a few weeks. He was going to disappear, this very night in fact, and it couldn't have been soon enough. Some of the guards may have mixed feelings about the execution methods of some of the death row inmates, but Butterfield wasn't one of them. Most of the inmates would have seen nothing wrong with it either. James Butterfield was universally hated, and with good reason. Not only was he a murderer, but he was a murderer of children, and no one wanted to consort with him. His list of crimes was long and colorful, but they mattered little in the end. At the end of the day, inmate Butterfield was a nuisance who drew too much attention onto the day-to-day operation of any dorm he was in. He seemed incapable of just acting like a regular person. Some of the inmates had speculated that perhaps his parents had beaten him as a child. Others said, if they had, it clearly wasn't enough. However much it had been, it wasn't the right amount, and Butterfield was the worse for it. Would that his mother had drowned him in the bathtub, or his father had racked him over a little too hard one night after coming home from the bar. 8 children would still be alive. 2 women wouldn't be spending time in Laurelwood, and everyone would be better for his absence. Instead, they now had to conduct tonight's business with the clandestine planning and execution of a group of witches at full moon. Butterfield was waiting at the glass, smiling his terrible snaggletooth grin at them. His teeth leaned like boards on a derelict fence, and many of them were the off-white of old gravestones. His oral hygiene, though, was far from the worst part of him. It was his lamb strangler's eyes, the color of heartless ice in the Arctic blue, that made people want nothing to do with him. Some of the guards had whispered that he reminded them of a certain inmate that was no longer hell-raising in these parts. One inmate Slayton, but inmate Slayton had been a small annoyance next to Butterfield. Butterfield was different than your average troublemaker. Butterfield liked to hurt people, and he was big enough to do it with relative ease. Oh my, to what do I owe a visit from the illustrious warden of Stragview? Butterfield said in his soft, pissy voice. You're being transferred to the death house, inmate Butterfield. Effective immediately, you will be remanded to J-Dorm until your execution. Butterfield scratched his chin thoughtfully. That's funny, Warden. I only recall having received one of my mandatory appeals. I am allotted 3. Isn't that right? The warden sneered. I'm afraid Mr. Conley has declined to return or to represent you. It probably has something to do with you trying to bite his face the last time he was here. Butterfield only shrugged. I didn't try. I did bite his face. 12 stitches, I hear. 2 more than Alvarez. The warden pulled air in through his nose and tried his best not to turn this man into ash. Alvarez had been a new guard, one of those kinder, gentler officers the academy kept promising, and he had been certified for less than 6 months. He'd been handing out mail in Pod 2 of F-Dorm when Butterfield had come up on his left side and bit his cheek. It had been sudden and needless, and Alvarez had been sent to Cashmere Medical for 10 stitches because of it. Worse still, Alvarez had quit over it. He just couldn't go back in there, he said, Butterfield or no Butterfield. The warden had told him to take some time and decide if he thought he could come back, but he didn't think Alvarez would come back. Inmate Butterfield, you are being rehoused. Submit to hand restraints and prepare to be moved. Butterfield smiled at the 2 bruisers beside him. And if I do not? Officer Cone smiled, and Sergeant Mays cracked his knuckles. Then these 2 gentlemen go into your cell, and I apply a healthy dose of chemical agents. You will likely be beaten in the struggle, perhaps even badly. Then you can sit in J-Dorm with broken ribs or a fractured skull while you wait for your execution date. A man could sit in J-Dorm for months like that before it's time for him to go. And medical isn't exactly in a big hurry to come see you after what you did to Nurse Hudges. What a fuck-up that had been. Butterfield had been in confinement for 3 months at that point, when his medical call-out had been answered. He had been as fine as paint for day shift the whole time. So, Officer Carlsberg thought it would be okay to step into the office and take a call while Butterfield was being seen by the nurse. When the traffic came over in choppy bursts that she needed assistance, he found her beaten to a pulp as Butterfield prepared to create his latest victim. They had gassed him, 5 of them had put him in restraints, and now he didn't leave confinement without an escort of at least 1 higher-up and 3 officers. Carlsberg had been suspended for 2 weeks without pay, but they couldn't afford to fire him. Officers were far too dear to fire for much these days. Butterfield didn't look terribly put off by this. I suppose I could use a change of scenery. Confinement is so drab, after all. He turned his back to the flap, and as it came down, he poked his hands through to receive the cuffs. Sergeant Mays took a step forward, but the warden put out a hand and took his cuffs. Sir, Sergeant Mays said, but he stopped when he saw the warden's eyes. The first cuff slipped on just as Butterfield tried to pull his arm back in, but the warden had a firm grip on the middle chain. Not today, boy, the warden growled. Butterfield pulled with all his might, but he was tugging against an immovable object. The warden brought his hand out and did something with the wrist that made the big man cry out in pain. He tried to pull away again, but the warden had him now, and he had no intention of letting him go. Give me your other hand, inmate Butterfield. Suck my... But he squealed again as the warden put pressure on the wrist. Give me your hand, James, or I won't just squeeze it like your daddy used to. He felt the man stiffen. How do you know about that? I know a lot of things, James. I know how he used to hurt you, how he used to look for reasons to hurt you. And if he'd known you better, he would have known you deserved it. You may not have then. You were a child. But you deserve everything you get now, everything and more. I don't have to make you hurt, however. You could come along with no trouble at all. Or you could come along with a broken wrist. The choice is yours, but I suggest you make it quickly. The other hand came out, as if on cue, and the warden snapped the cuffs on. Sergeant, roll door 8 in quad 2, the warden said into his radio. He stepped aside as Mays and Combs stepped up around him. They wanted their fun too, and the warden couldn't blame them. Alvarez had been their friend, and they wanted to give this waste of life a little payback. He spun around and made to lunge at them, but the two were strong, chosen for this because of their size and strength. Mays pushed him backward, and Butterfield fell on his ass. He was forced to look up at the two of them, but wasn't quick enough to do more than yell something stupid before Cone stepped forward and booted him in the face. On the ground, legs apart, he shouted as he brought out the leg restraints. Shove it up your, Butterfield started, but Mays kicked him in the ribs when he refused to turn. He curled up as he tried to protect his vitals, and they rolled him onto his stomach as they got to work. Pretty soon, the leg shackles were on, and they were lifting him between them as they hauled him off. Didn't have to be like this, the warden said, as they headed for the door to the quad. Butterfield said nothing. He continued to say nothing as they put the spit shield on him and put the orange mittens on his hands, the ones with the Velcro straps. He was nicely trussed when they finally carried him through the middle gate. The warden could see him peeking as they steered him away from the front and towards the west gate. West gate was where people went when they were being transported somewhere, and the warden knew that Butterfield likely wanted to know where they were going. He wouldn't believe me if I told him, the warden thought, as they tossed him into the back of a transport van and slammed the door. Let's go, the warden said, as Cones climbed into the driver's seat and he took the passenger. We've wasted enough time. Mays climbed into the space between the cage and the front, and as Butterfield lay there groaning, the three men drove him to his final destination. The back door came open and found Butterfield staring out at the last place he would have expected. The gates of the Botanical Gardens were thrown wide, and the lights led down the path and into the dark depths of the garden. Butterfield wasn't sure he wanted to follow those lights. They were just a little too inviting, and he thought about making a break for the town he knew was just off to the side of the woods that were out of sight. Before he could decide, however, the van accelerated forward and sent him spilling from the back as he bounced across the concrete. He rolled through the gates, groaning as he tumbled, the restraints digging into his wrists and legs as the pavement chewed at his exposed skin. He lay before the ticket booth, panting as he tried to get to his feet. The gates, however, were already closing as he got to a knee, and the crash was exceptionally ominous as they came together. Butterfield got to his feet, looking through the murky netting of the spit shield as he tried to make heads or tails of the place. The pathway wound through a skeletal collection of trees and into what appeared to be an exhibit of mushrooms. The lights clearly intended for him to follow them, but Butterfield turned left instead, looking at the outskirts of a desolate farmland that looked ready for the next year's planting when spring came. Butterfield rarely did what people expected of him, and this would be no exception, he thought. He was so taken by the choices ahead of him that he failed to notice when the chains tumbled from him and the orange gloves simply fell from his hands. He had taken only a couple of steps towards the farmland when he saw them. They awakened something in him, something he hadn't thought about in years. As bright as the path was, the farm area was as shadowy as a crypt at midnight, and by the light of the crescent moon, he could see the hairy, goaty things as they roamed around and waited for him to step into the darkness. He could hear the voice of his old grandmother, a woman who was far more sadistic than his father had ever been. She didn't hit, she didn't yell, but she was a master of verbal trauma. Every bad behavior, every slip-up, every sin was met with a story of what would happen to him if he continued. She had died when he was 10, but the stories she had told him would live on forever. One Christmas, as little James went about his mischief, she had told him about how the naughty list was the least of his concerns. Father Christmas will see you if you continue to do such things, James. I ain't worried about no Santa Claus, James told her, his accent as far from hers as bread was to mud. It isn't him you should fear, my boy. He will give your name to the Krampus, and he and his belsnickles will come to take you away. Little James had looked up with concern, asking what that was, and Grandma had been happy to instruct him. The Krampus comes with his wicker basket and his birch rod, his belsnickles capering around him. They are goaty, with horns and hooves and coarse fur, and the children hear them clump, clump, clumping up the hall, and know that their doom approaches. They put the children in a wicker cage, beat them with the rods, and drag them to hell so they may torment them for all eternity. If you keep moving down the path you are on, your fate will be the same, boy. As he watched those hunkered and hoofed shadows moving through the darkness, he remembered the fate his grandmother had spoken of, and shivered. Buttersworth hadn't known fear in a very long time, and as he turned and ran down the lighted path, it never occurred to him that this might be part of the trap as well. He flew down the path, the exhibits rushing past like the spindly arms of the dead trees. He didn't know where he was going, but as the lily pond rose up before him, he found his eyes rising to the statue of the lady that stood on the plinth within it. She was an island in this small pond, and as he moved close to the shore, he barely noticed that he was free. There was something intoxicating about her. She was his mother, his ideal mother, and his wife all in one. She was love and hope and the realization of what he had never had or felt before. She seemed to spread her arms wide, inviting him in as he sloshed into the water, and he would have probably drowned himself if the statue had asked it of him. Unfortunately, they never got the chance to find out. The clop on the pavement was loud enough to bring him out of his stupor, and then they were all around him. The Belsnickles, their clubs drawn and ready to dispense his punishment and drag him off to hell. Butterfield made a sloppy dash, but they were on him in a second. They were pounding him with those clubs, smashing his face and breaking his bones. Butterfield tried to fight, tried to push them back, but their furry bodies were as strong as oaks. He coughed and was shocked to see blood on his hands. One of them caught him behind the knee, and he fell hard into the water. A hoof came down and pushed his head beneath the surface, and as he tried to struggle, James Butterfield gasped and pulled the muddy water of the pond into his lungs. He was drowning. He was dying, and as the darkness came up to collect him, he feared he might find a very different kind of hell was waiting for him. Whatever it was, the Brandylow never discovered. Butterfield sank into the lily pond, just like the others had, and whether his essence was added to the collective or not was open to speculation. James Butterfield was dead, and that was all that mattered to those involved. "It's done," Sam said, bringing the cuffs to the warden as he stood by the gate. "Thank you, my friend," the warden said, bowing a little. "I know your qualms about the operation, but we aren't friends," Sam said, "so fulfill your end of the bargain." The warden sighed and reached into his pocket, pulling out a stone with a screaming face on it. "I will have this returned to me when your lady is returned. Am I understood?" "Perfectly," Sam said, as he looked at the face as the two of them took their leave. How this was going to help, Sam didn't know, but he could feel the power coursing through it, and he was hopeful that it might be just what they needed. He stumbled back to the guard shack and found that someone had brought the mail in. There, amongst the bills and the garbage, was a letter from Randy. It was from an address in Arkansas, and as he slid it open, he hoped for good news. It wasn't there, but it was hopeful. "Sam, have not found the lady, but I have found other Brandylow. Some are old, the ones from the park, but some of them are the lost ones that Tobias have talked about. They joined me, said they felt moved to find me, and now we don't worry about the Whistler anymore. He avoids us now, and I think we're getting close to her. Hope all is well. Randy." Time, it seemed, was fleeting, and Sam had to get this to Randy quick. Sam called to Marshall, one of the few reliable ones, and told him to make ready to leave. "You need to take this to Randy. It should be easy to find him if you feel him out. Take this letter and go to the place he sent it, and..." But Sam could already see the futility. Marshall had been turned around the time of the Civil War. He didn't understand. He didn't understand the world any more than Sam would have understood his. This was too important to leave in the hands of fate. Sam knew what needed to be done, but Randy wasn't going to like it when he did. He told Marshall to return to his work, and he went to talk to Tobias. "You're still here. Thanks for stopping by. Dr. Plague here. Always a pleasure to see all my new and old viewers coming by for another one of my spooky tales. If you'd like to support the show, you can always take part in one of our channel offers through Fume or Aura, or you can just click on another video when they come up. I'd really appreciate it. For our newer viewers, we also have lots of playlists and other things if you'd like to get caught up. I know some of my series have been going on for quite a while. If you'd like to get my latest book, there's a link down below that'll take you to my Amazon page. Towesey Homestead just came out, so if that's something you'd like to get your hands on, go ahead and have a look down there. If you'd like a signed copy, you can go ahead and email me from my email address on the site, and I'll get with you about shipping information and ship you a signed copy. If you'd like to support the channel in a more monetary fashion, we also have membership through YouTube, and we've got a Patreon that you can get the information for in the description. We have lots of tiers and everything to suit your needs. Patrons that support on the $10 tier, that's our Ghostly Reader tier, get a book anytime I write one, signed and on their doorstep. As you may have noticed, there's a list of patrons and members on the screen, and I'd like to personally thank every one of them for taking a hand in the future of this channel. Well, that's enough for tonight. Dr. Plague, signing off. Have a wonderful evening.